I'm going to be so honest with y'all. I am split on this issue. Usually, when I come in here, I have a very clear stance about what I believe. But when it comes to book hauls, I don't think they're entirely bad. So, let me explain. Hey, y'all, welcome back to my channel. I am Leah, and today I wanted to talk about book hauls because I know I'm not the only one that saw that trend of take your significant other with you to Barnes& and Noble.
Okay, so we're gonna do the Barnes & Noble challenge for Tyler's birthday.
The rules are, I'm gonna give you 2 minutes to 2 minutes to grab whatever you want. A few minutes to browse around.
Go. Yeah.
And I was very jealous. Part of me was like, I want somebody to take me to the bookstore and have me pick out books to take home. And the other part of me was looking at people with, it was usually like a little basket full of books, looking at them with all these books, being like, are they going to read all that? And then also seeing people's book buying habits and just being like, which then made me question about our relationships to books in terms of book buying and consumption. And this is a long conversation. It has been had so many times on YouTube, on TikTok, on Twitter. Usually people have the same sort of argument. And for the most part, I do agree with them, but I don't agree with where they end up. So in this video, I do want to talk about the problematic nature of book hauls, why I struggle to fully view it as a problem, and then also what we can do about it, how we can move through this issue. Since I've joined the online book community a few years ago on this side of the camera, right, I quickly noticed how often book spaces were about book buying. You know, I came in here, I was like, ooh, I read so many books, I have so many opinions. For me, I was reading as many books as my favorite bookstagrammers. So I was like, let me do a bookstagram. Like we're reading the same amount of books. I have thoughts, I have feelings. I was following a lot of book reviewers. I was following people who would read the books and review the books. And when I got into Bookstagram, a lot of the people who were making the most impact were people who were buying books, people who were doing a bunch of book hauls, or people doing book memes, right? The rest of us who were doing book reviews were not getting the attention. I've seen the arguments about how book reading and book buying are two different hobbies, right? There are people who just want to buy books, there are people who just want them as collector's items, and there are people who actually want to read books. And so these are two separate things. Some people buy books simply for decoration, which then makes me think, is reading an aesthetic to you? This is also a conversation I have seen quite a few times around hobbies and people adopting hobbies to make themselves seem more cultured than they are without actually engaging in the hobbies. And one way that you can adopt a hobby is through money. We also see this with personal style. People are not developing their own personal style. They're simply buying into trendy things and putting them all together, which is why we see videos of people like influencers at conferences and they all look the same because they're all doing the trendy thing instead of adopting their own personal style. And so we see the same thing with books. We see people who are just like, oh, this new book, let me go buy it so that way I can tell everybody, hey, I have this new book, without actually engaging with that book, without actually reading that book. And so what kind of message are we sending to viewers when all we do is buy, 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 consume, 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 but we don't actually engage with the books that we buy? So I've talked about this with other bookstagrammers because we feel like a lot of our content isn't getting the attention as those who are consuming all the time, those who have like tons of books, who have these huge libraries, who make really aesthetic things around books without actually engaging with the books. So like that's my whole thing. It's like, how can we as book lovers, as book enjoyers, as people who think critically as books, how can we get the attention when, especially when I'm on booktube, when you go to these top creators and you see their top videos, it's bookstore vlogs, it's Kindle unboxings. And it's like you have to pay and spend all of this money to get attention. And part of me has sympathy for creators because I know as a creator, I'm not a full-time creator. I do not make that much. I understand them being like, hey, well, if my audience wants to see me go to a bookstore and buy books, I'm going to keep going to the bookstore and buying books because that's going to make me money. And so they keep doing that. If my audience wants to see me unbox Kindles, I'm going to keep unboxing Kindles. It kind of is fueling this nasty cycle between the viewer and the creator, where the viewer is like, oh, I like this content. So the creator keeps making that content. And then the viewer is like, well, they have all these books. Maybe I need to go get all these books. And so they're trying to get all these books, but then they're overwhelmed with the amount of books they have. And the creator is overwhelmed trying to like keep up with what the audience wants. And it's just like this really, really nasty cycle. And so we see people with these book hauls, they have all of these books that they get. And then a few months later, they have an unhaul where they were like, yeah, I picked up this book because it was pretty, but I'm going to get rid of it. Why did you pick up the book? Right? I think my main problem with a lot of hauls is mindless consumption. That is a reoccurring theme on this channel. I really have a problem with people who are not thinking critically about the things that they consume, whether the things that they buy, the things that they watch, the things that they engage with. I think that that is my biggest problem with this, is that I'm seeing people and I'm seeing their buying habits and they're like, I'll just buy the whole series. I haven't read the first book. And then they get online and then they complain that the book was bad and they wasted their money on it. But I was like, if you did a little bit of due diligence, just a tiny bit, read the first chapter, see if you even like the writing style, right? Just a little bit, just a little bit. And now they're bashing books, saying books are bad when it's like the book wasn't for them and they would have known that if they would have read it. And part of me is also like, it is the publisher's fault because a lot of them have stopped putting blurbs on the back of the book, so we don't even know what the books are about. You go and read a new hardcover and it's just like, this is a great book, amazing book, you need to buy it. What is the book about? What's going on in the book? We don't know. And so people buy things based on the cover because that's all the information that they give us. Hey, pretty cover, you should buy it. So part of me is like, it's also a publishing issue. And then the rest of me is like, us as viewers, as consumers, we're watching this content. We're giving it views. We're giving it our attention. We're signaling to the creator, hey, keep making things like this. And so it's just a really nasty cycle over and over and over again. And people keep being like, book hauls are problematic. I wouldn't just say book hauls. I also watch makeup videos. I also watch fashion videos. So I see Shein hauls, I see makeup hauls, I see all of these different kind of hauls. And then we keep having this conversation about consumerism and people who are collecting too much, people who have too much. And I think it's all of our faults, right? It's the industry, it's the creator, and it's also the viewer. I think we're all to blame here, and we all have some personal responsibility that we have to take in terms of creating our content and in terms of the content that we are viewing. So for me, how I took accountability for my book buying things, because I was very guilty of that. I had a whole bunch of unread books. I actually had like a few dozen, which to some people may not be a lot, because I know people have hundreds of books that they own that they have never read. And I'm like, I can't imagine. A few dozen was overwhelming for me. That was a lot for me. So in 2023, I sat down. I was like, I'm not buying any more books until I read the books that I own. And I made myself read at least a third of the book. At that point, I can decide to DNF it. And I did DNF, I would say about 6 of them. So I read about 30 and I DNF'd about 6. Through that process, it really made me look at my consumerism. It really made me sit down and be like, okay, I have a problem here. I keep buying books because they're pretty. I keep buying books because I'm like, I just want to buy a book today. I keep buying books for all these reasons. And then when I get the book, I force myself to sit down and read the book because I paid all this money for it. Right? I'm paying $30 for a book at a local bookstore. I'm going to sit down and read that whole thing. And then I'm not having a good reading experience. And so now I'm mad at the book because I spent all this money on it and I wanted to have a good reading experience and I didn't, because I just went to the store and just bought something because it sounded nice, right? And now I'm upset and now I'm mad and now I hate reading. And so sitting down and actually having to read the books that I read, actually having to take accountability for my consumerism really helped me to sit down and be like, okay, what are the things that I can do to help curb this problem? Do I still buy books? Yes, I actually do have a book haul. That was a lot of what inspired this video. I have a book haul. I will probably make a short with all the books that I've gotten because I got my tax refund, and I was like, time to buy all the books I've wanted. But sitting down with my book buying choices made me think about our relationships to books. I think a lot of people look at books as trophies, and we have seen critiques of people who are talking about elders who die and they have like cabinets full of really fine, expensive china that they're saving for a special occasion, and they rarely, if ever, use it. They just really keep it there to look pretty. And so people responded to this by being like, use your special occasion things now. And that reminds me of books. Like, I remember a few years ago, Sonia Sanchez was in Toni Morrison's The Pieces I Am, her documentary, and she had, it was either Sula or The Bluest Eye. It was one of those books, and it was crumbling to pieces. She used that book cover to cover. She was marking it, dog earing it, referring back to it, studying it. And I was like, I'm not using books the right way. Because I think a lot of us are really precious with our books because, again, we spend so much money on them. We are like, oh, we can't do anything to damage it. We can't do, and it kind of takes books out of what they're meant to be. The books are meant to be used. They're meant to be used. They're meant to be read. They're meant to be engaged with. They're meant to be studied, right? And the amount of people I see who are like, I would never dog ear the page of book. Meanwhile, I'm like, I need to remember this because I mark up my whole book and I just want to be able to go back and be like, okay, right here is the actual thing that I want, the most important idea of this whole book, especially my nonfiction books. I mark them things all the way up. And so sometimes there's some ideas that are like, this is the most important idea out of all the great ideas in this book. So I dog ear my pages. I know some of y'all are going to get real mad at me, but it's like we have to think about the relationship that we have with our books and why we feel like we need to treat them as these precious little trophies when they're meant to be read, they're meant to be engaged with, and they're meant to be used. Where I'm torn about this issue is that oftentimes when people come up with solutions, they're like, audiobooks, ebooks, there are so many. You don't have to have a huge library full of physical books. That's really where my problem comes in. So I used to work in a library. I used to work in archives. I was the archivist assistant. And one of the first things that she told me is that digital is not archival work. You can put things on the internet to share with people, but you do not archive things on the internet. You keep a physical record of it. And so that's why I'm like, it is very important to have physical copies of books. And one good example of this is the Bible. Before, I believe, 1942, there were no references to homosexuality in the Bible. Yet today, all you ever hear is that homosexuality is a sin. The Bible says so. The Bible says it. But back in the day, the Bible didn't say it. The Bible actually said pedophilia is the biggest sin. Pedophilia is the thing that we should be worried about. But around the early 1900s, they changed pedophilia to homosexuality. So that way, for most of us, all we ever known is that homosexuality is this huge evil because they got to change what was in the physical copies of the book. There are people who still have physical copies of books, 300-year-old Bibles, and they can go in there and reference and be like, actually, the Bible didn't say that. This was changed at some point for a particular political agenda. I'm going to put the link to that below because I don't want y'all to be like, I'm making it up. I'm actually not. The original Hebrew, the original Greek often talked about power differences between a man and a boy. Never said anything about a man and a man. It was always like a man and a boy should not be like they do with women. And anytime same-sex relations came up, it was always a man and a boy. Every single time. And so that is really the importance of having physical media, especially in the United States, where they're currently trying to defund the libraries, right? My library right now has suspended Hoopla because they were using federal funding, which has been cut. And so now, people who only have that library do not have federal funding anymore. And so in that way, I'm like, we still need physical media. I think that is still so very important. But there is a way to get physical media without having to engage in like going to a bookstore, buying all these new books that you do not use and that you waste and that you end up unhauling wherever and doing that. And so I want to introduce you to the term literary citizen and think about how to be a good literary citizen. So I saw this video by Pen Pals Pod.
If the writer is dead, I get it from the library. If the writer is rich, I get it from the library. If the writer is starting out, I buy the book.
Being a good literary citizen means if you have a friend who has published a book, buy the book. Buy your friend's book. You don't have to read it if you don't want to. But if someone you know has written a book and gotten it published, buy the book.
Honestly, that video got a lot of pushback, which I was very surprised about because people are like, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do that. And I just thought it was like very neat to have someone else talk about their methods when it comes to engaging with books and engaging with reading as a hobby, because it doesn't have to be super expensive. You don't have to buy a whole bunch of books. These are simply suggestions for how to engage with books without going into hyperconsumption. Okay. And so the first one is utilizing your local library. As I said before, in the United States, the libraries are being defunded. They need us. You need to show up. You need to get your library card. You need to go to the library, right? If you're someone that works from home, work at the library. If you're someone that likes to work in a coffee shop, get your coffee, go to the library. They need bodies in the library. If you can volunteer your time or your money, please do that. If you can go to your city council and tell them, hey, we need to protect our libraries, do that. Make sure that they are allocating funds to the library. Like, there's so much work that needs to be done in protecting our library institutions, and you can be a part of that, right? In addition to also utilizing your library, using that to check out your books, your ebooks, your audiobooks. I know a lot of people talk about it's just more convenient for me to buy my own book. And I want to remind you, I'm not the first person to say this. Convenience comes at a cost, and the cost is often connection and community. There is something different about going to the library, looking at the books there, and then you also get a good understanding of the populace, right? I remember around this time last year, I went to my local library and I found this book that I had never heard of. No one had ever talked about it online, but people in my local community, which had a really big Hispanic population, they were like, requested this book. And so that's how I learned about this book. And I actually really enjoyed it. And I would never have found that if I just was online looking at all of this information that's curated for me. I had to go to my library. I had to look and see, oh, what do the people in this community like to read? Right? And let me see if I can find a good book. That's something that I can't get from just let me go online, let me look at reviews. No, I went to my library and I looked at the blurb on the back of the book and I had a good experience. And you can have that good experience too. Go to your local library. Please go to your local library. So one of those creators, she talked about how she goes to the library when the author is famous or if the author is dead. Something that I will do is I buy used books if the author is famous or if the author is dead, because either the money is not going to them or they have enough, right? They don't need my little coins. So I'm going to go to thrift books. That is my number one place. I know in the US there's also Powell's. You can buy used books from there. Thrift books is a really great place to go to for classics. They have tons of classics. You can get them for like $4. It's also a really good place to go to for popular books. I get really annoyed when I see a huge creator who's like, let me go to Amazon and buy all of the Harry Potter series. If you want to read the Harry Potter series and you don't want to support J.K. Rowling, Thrift Books has the entire series for like $20. Yeah. Go to Thrift Books, go to Powell's, go to your used bookstore. Like, they have really great books there. That is where I got my copy of Salvage the Bones. You can also go to the library. Pretty much every library that I have been a patron of has done library sales. My local library now does monthly library sales. You can go to the library where they are selling books. For my local library, they actually get books that people donate and then sell those, and that is also an option for you. If you're looking to donate books, donate them to your local library. They donate the books to the local library sells those books, and then the profit goes to pay for library expenses. So another way to help your local library while also buying used books, while also being a mindful consumer. If you did want to buy new, if you're like, I hate the smell of used books, I clean my books. So I hate the smell of used books. I don't have a local library, and that is actually a problem for a lot of people. If you did want to buy new, options that you have are your local bookstores. The reason why it's so important to shop local is that your money stays in your community. When you buy from these big places like Amazon, Barnes and Nobles, Books a Million, that money is not going to the workers. That money is not going to your city. That money is going straight to the top, to the CEOs. Whereas when you buy from a local bookstore, that money is going to pay the people who work there, is going to keep their lights on, is going to allow them to be able to get books. And if they make enough money, it starts to become a community space. Now they can host events. Now they can have author signings. Now they can have all of these different things because that money is staying in that community. And so in the United States, with our tax money, there are some things that we are not in control of, unfortunately, some very violent and nasty things. This is one way that you can be in control of your money, is by supporting your local businesses and ensuring that they stay profitable, because their biggest threat is Walmart. Their biggest threat is Amazon, it's Target, it's Barnes and Noble, it's Books a Million. These are their biggest threat. And if you can keep them there, you create another community center besides the library. Hopefully we keep our libraries. This is the fight of our generation, keeping keeping the library. You can also buy new from either the publisher, or if the author is indie, you can buy directly from them. This is where I put the asterisk, because some indie authors are Amazon only, and so that's why I'm like, little asterisk, because like sometimes if you really want to support that author, you gotta buy it off Amazon, which sucks. And I hate it. There's some authors whose books I do want, but they're Amazon only. And I'm like, one day, one day I'll buy it. Not today. But yeah, if you can buy directly from the author, do that. You can also use a book co-op, which is what I use. I use Tertulia. So for $25 a year, I'm able to get access to pretty much every single book that exists on the internet. And I get 10% off every single purchase up until I spend, I want to say $150. Then I get 20% off. And I also get free shipping every single purchase. It is a really great alternative to Amazon. It's cheaper than Amazon's annual membership, right? Especially if you only use Amazon for buying books. It's cheaper than Amazon for using memberships, and you get 10% off every single book, which is also similar to the discount that Amazon has. So it is a really great alternative to Amazon if you want to use it. I don't know where Tertulia is. I'm in the United States. It works in the United States. I don't know what countries it's in. I would say last resort are Barnes and Noble, Books a Million, Amazon. The reason I'm saying this is that I have talked to other creators who live in places like the Caribbean, and they're like, we don't have local bookstores, we don't have libraries, all we have is Amazon. And in that case, if that's all you got, I get it, right? It's like when people are like, we're boycotting Walmart. I'm like, baby, there's nothing else here. I live in small town Mississippi. All we got is the Walmart. Is either Walmart or Star. And that's the thing. If you're like, buy books from Amazon or not read, buy books from Amazon, right? That is a last resort for a lot of us who have options. And that's really the thing. If you have options, utilize all those other options before you go to Amazon or Books a Million or Barnes and Noble. Like, that should not be your first stop. That should be your last resort. And if you have no other options, use what you got. But that's it for this video. Like I said, I don't think book hauls are all the way bad. I think that there are better ways to engage with books and with book buying, and also with owning physical media, because I do think that that is still very, very, very important. And so I hope, if nothing else, you got a few ideas about how you can better engage with your hobby and how to not break the bank, because I also think it is very important to not keep pushing this agenda that, like, oh, if you want to be a reader, you got to have tons, dozens of hardback new editions and this and that, and it's annoying. There are so many options that you can do. These are just a few suggestions. You don't have to do everything that's suggested in this video, but if you can make different decisions, if you can make more ethical decisions for the planet, for your wallet, for your hobby, make them. It's just a very small thing that you can do to make reading a more sustainable hobby. I don't see why you don't do it. That's it. That's all I got. So I will see y'all in the next video. Bye.